Уважаемые коллеги, дорогие друзья, рад вас приветствовать.
Dear colleagues, we are very happy to welcome you at a very interesting session on the GAIDAR forum. This is an experts panel discussion, the best practices for public civil servants training in the CIS countries. I suggest a very free format of communication. We're at our round table. This is really the round table since, well, as for the seating, well, there are some still seats at the table. So I suggest you move closer, and we want everybody to feel comfortable, and you're welcome to exchange your thoughts in a very free format. Let's discuss what we can do in order to improve our training of public and civil experts and servants. Well, we want to be able to exchange technologies, to learn from each other, to be able to expand on our most promising practices for their training. And we really want to provide an impetus to the development of our countries who live in these countries, and we people responsible for training and retraining of civil servants. We always want to feel comfortable that the training is sufficient and that public servants can perform very well when delivering their services. Here in Russia, we hear quite often some criticisms addressed at our presidential academy that we are not very effective and efficient in training of the public servants. But I hope that our today's work will contribute somehow to the improvement of this situation. We have quite a few very interesting speakers who are going to make their presentations at this session. I am quite lucky. I'm not the only moderator for this roundtable. I have my colleague Moderatbek Abdrassilov, the Rector for the public management, public service management under the Kazakhstan president, and we took part in the other session about the training of public servants in the Russian Federation, where Bolatbek made a very interesting presentation. It was really quite fascinating. We saw comments from very many participants who thanked for extremely interesting information. And your presentation inspired quite a lot of discussions. We started this conversation about the innovations that we may expect from the Republic of Kazakhstan, on how Kazakhstan wants to improve the public service training. Maybe you will start with saying a few words to the roundtable participants as far as the current topic is concerned. Thank you, Dmitri Anatolievich, for this opportunity to say a few words. Today there were several panel discussions of the issues and challenges in the public service and public service training. Certainly the professional public servants can be trained only through professional training, and we know training plays a very important role there, and this issue is being raised at all forums, and Gaidar Forum is becoming a very interesting platform for discussing and sharing experiences in the development of public services and training systems. And today, when we were discussing all this at various panels, we all learned a lot from each other. All countries, talking about the CIS countries, presumably, and I'm sure that this new education, this new development, the Eurasian Economic Union, is a very interesting community, and people from the academia, from the government services, from the Eurasian Union want to learn something from each other, but probably what is really more important is to remember that while training people for public service, we should emphasize the importance of sharing the same language. When and I believe that these integration processes and the information exchange and setting up of some establishment of some structures, infrastructure for training, development of some curricula that we may share would play an increasing role. The Shanghai organization may also be involved in this, but although Eurasian continent is more important for us at this point, we've discussed this issue for a number of years. We were talking about the Eurasian measurement, and the designers of this project launched those discussions and launched a very interesting topic under those discussions: availability of a program where curriculum will be shared among various countries, where the young professional public servants would be able to enrich themselves through learning from each other's experiences. And such curricula and training programs would contribute to the development of a very proactive cohort of public servants who would be able to promote the idea of Eurasian development further. I'm sure, or rather, I believe that we may discuss this issue as well today, but to be more specific, and if we want to touch upon the readily available topics that can be implemented within a reasonable time, we can think about some training modules, since our curriculum supposes having certain modules and blocks, and we discuss it in such a way that maybe we can ensure that our public servants can work together and can learn together under certain training courses. And we understood that there could be one module that all our academies may share, where a module that would focus mostly on the development of the Eurasian Economic Union, its regulatory framework, maybe we can think about some mutual internship programs. Maybe there could be some short-term internships from 2 weeks to a month or 3 months. We may have some kind of online training programs, and there are 5 countries who could have launched a program where, for example, one day would be devoted to the Kyrgyz Republic, another to the Russian Federation, where speakers from our academies would be able to deliver their presentations online, where they would discuss the government structure, the regulatory framework, the development strategies, and some other issues, including culture, education, and other components of the government and state structure. And I think such modules would not require very costly inputs, and they look quite implementable at this point. This would be a very flexible training program that can be fairly easily implemented in the CIS. And we may propose some other formats, like the Shanghai Organization for Cooperation. We are talking about the potential development of the Shanghai Organization for Cooperation University, and we had quite lively discussions of this topic, and those ideas may become the subject of our panel discussions, and certainly we need to support this work with a lot of research and analytical work. And I'm talking about the Eurasian Economic Union and Eurasian Economic Community. We need to align our regulatory frameworks, and there is really quite a lack of research in this area. Therefore, I really encourage the experts and researchers present at this roundtable be more attentive to those topics and maybe focus their further research on this agenda. Thank you very much for your input. Well, the title of our session is all about the CIS countries. But we're talking about the Eurasian community, and this is quite logical since this is a fairly new community, and we all need to spend a great deal of efforts to be able to establish the regulatory and legal frameworks to ensure that the community continue to develop. And certainly our the civil service academies of the participating countries are maybe less flexible when it comes to training, but I mean, who else will be able to respond to the actual needs of this new community? We could think about establishment of some joint teams of researchers and trainers to support the new economic developments. And we know that there are other countries interested in those developments. We started some swap programs, and last year we had very interesting programs when your colleagues arrived at RANEPA and our people went to Kazakhstan, and we want to appreciate again your hosting of them. Such exchange programs are maintained by several CIS countries. And I believe we can start making another step there and starting developing some common training programs, or where the diplomas or certificates would be mutually recognizable. And because the key issues related to the public service are very much uniform, and they are common for our environment. And we believe that the more we expose our students to various countries through training programs, the quicker we will arrive at this situation when we will have a common understanding of the same topics, and we will be able to achieve the goals of the Eurasian Economic Community in a faster and more efficient manner. I am afraid that I am now trying to work Andrei Markovich out of his job, maybe. Because I saw you going out of this room, and I thought maybe I insulted you with some of my statements. No. No microphone, please. Please switch on the microphone. Okay, yes, now we hear the mic. Okay. Those issues that we have on our agenda for this roundtable discussion. Well, the Eurasian community thinkers have something to say about every bullet point there in the agenda. The Eurasian countries are represented, plus Tajikistan. Let's start with Chingiz Aytmatov, his interesting quotation, which is very close to what we're talking about when we are talking about the innovations in the public servants training. Very often, we cannot do something, and there is only one explanation: we're lazy. We are lazy in terms of our thinking, or we don't want to spend another effort. Well, Chingiz Aytmatov is a great writer, and you remember this quote from him, and we should start developing some specific training programs, and Bolatbek already mentioned some of those efforts. Now, during this Shanghai session, we concluded that session with the publication of the training program. And our comments on that: 2016 is going to be the year of education in the CIS, and one of the mechanisms that we may propose to implement that year of education, maybe at the end of 2016, we should probably devote the public service magazine to the innovative practices in training of public servants in the CIS. We're talking about the issues that are mentioned here on this slide, and they are very much in line with what our moderators were saying, that we should really develop some kind of a common education environment for the public servants in our countries. Another issue that we want to discuss today is to have the single database. And Mikhail Nalbandyan, a very known Armenian writer, said that we should do everything to improve our life. Some people are very skeptical about the digital technologies because they believe that sometimes the IT may kind of kill the actual common sense. And John Nail used to say that we are suffocating from the lack of knowledge, but we are really drowned in the sea of data or information. But it doesn't mean that we should really live without the IT, because they may improve the lives of the faculty and they improve the life of the students. What we do really expect of the information technologies? Maybe we want to have the common library of the training resources. We should have the common training materials, but we should remember that we should synchronize the process for development of a modern platform, because if we develop all that on different technology platforms, we may not be able to ensure that they're compatible. So we should train the faculty. And today, the information technologies may not get to the teaching process because some trainers, some faculty feel that they're not quite ready to implement those technologies, and it's not their fault. Sometimes they simply lack the knowledge. We should somehow ensure that we train them en masse. And what really constrains the development of joint master's programs? Vasil Bykov, a Belarusian writer and public figure, said that we have a very different legislative frameworks. Some of those norms have nothing to do with real life, and we should have some expert community that would be able to work in that legal field and help us improve the legal and regulatory framework to make sure that this framework helps rather than impedes our joint developments. If we're talking about the list of the joint master's program, we should probably think about first and foremost about such factors that could drive the development of the Eurasian economy. If we're talking about we know that the economic potential of all those countries differs very much, but if we're talking about the various speeds for development, then again, we can, as Bolatbek says, maybe we should develop our joint master's program for integration. But remember, our energy consumption is by far higher than the global average. Let's focus on the environmental technologies when we think about the joint master's program. Remember that Nazarbayev defended his doctor's thesis on energy consumption and the power saving technologies, and we may be based on that as well. We know that our academy is also developing some training programs on monitoring and controlling the corruption, and we can also develop from that. Rudaki, a Tajik poet from the 9th century, said that talent and knowledge like bright light, and we cannot leave the darkness without them. And of course, when we think about how we train the researchers and trainers, sometimes it's very different from what the current requirement needs. Well, today, for example, in Kazakhstan, the postgraduates cannot really aspire for the doctor's thesis before they have a publication in one of the globally recognized journals or magazines. Maybe this is a requirement we should all follow. And we, historically speaking, we think about the postgraduate studies as something to protect the faculty from the outside. But look, we don't think about how we're going to substitute the older faculty with the new experts, because we should find people, our best bachelors and best masters. They should be the basis to recruit the future trainers and professors, because they would be probably our best potential for further development. As far as the role of the academies in the expert-analytical work for the government authorities, first and foremost, we should understand what the current government is. Nikolai Berdyaev, a Russian philosopher, used to say that the government exists just doesn't exist to convert the current life into heavens, but rather not to let it become the hell. And we should what he thinks, but we should integrate the interests of the government, business community, and the civil society to join the efforts in making our life a heaven rather than hell. And we know that, as we heard yesterday, that sometimes we don't see any practical implementation or output from our training programs because sometimes we do not involve the business communities or civil societies enough into their development. And I want to quote from Abay Kunanbayev, a Kazakh philosopher and educator, who says that the knowledge would become bitterness if there is nobody along your side with whom you can share your best moments and your worst moments. And again, we should think we need to develop the negotiation skills, the communication skills among our students, the ones who will get those jointly recognized diplomas and degrees. The Shanghai organization discovered that we may vary in the approaches to training of our students because our academy is we cannot recognize the modules of all institutes altogether, but the idea of integration is very valuable, though, and it's really a great idea. And as far as the areas of our joint research, I don't want to read from this slide, but this is all the strategy for the sales development. All those areas that are enumerated on this slide, they are all mentioned in the latest version of the strategy document and version, and we want to improve the competences of our public servants, and we want to improve the competences of those who work in the state-owned companies to make our economy in the series more competitive and more successful in its performance. And since we have rectors from the Mongolia Academy, I want to quote from Genghis Khan, who said that if you are doing something, don't be afraid, but if you're afraid of something, don't do it. Let's not fear everything. Let's start doing this work together, and this collaboration will help us develop some new qualities in ourselves. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Andrei Markovich, for such a brilliant quotation from some cultural and historical figures, and you somehow quoted Berdyaev in a more optimistic manner than it actually says. You are just left the word finally out of your quotation, but then I understood at the end. Why? Because the joint programs are all offered, including the curriculum, and in a very detailed way. So the only thing left now for us is just to vote what should be done next, and that will be the end of this roundtable discussion. But maybe we will still give some other people to say something. Okay. Well, if Almas Nasirov, the president of the academy and the president of the Kyrgyz Republic.
After the previous intervention, I can only add something, making some comments. What was said was about the things that are really being done now. As for the master's programs, this is done with the Russian Academy of Sciences University and other universities, and the idea is the basic one. It determines the key approach to the implementation of those programs in the Russian Federation, in Armenia, in Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan, and thus we are integrating the Eurasian countries. I agree with Evgeny Markovich that this is a common problem. In some countries, traditional standards are adhered to. In others, the Bologna process is being introduced, and still others, some new systems are invented. And it's necessary that some unified potential of expertise should be worked out. In order to implement all those programs and trends in the format of Eurasian integration, we need a high quality scientific and methodological basis. And the first step should be unification of the curricula, what we are doing now on an everyday basis. Is this expert interaction works out some basic concept of implementing this joint scientific and educational activity, will be able to move on to further steps. A priori, educating human resources specialists, especially in conditions of active integration processes, is related with the demands and problems that we face now. For example, the problem of necessity of new normative acts that would specify different powers of decision makers that would determine different landmarks in the implementation of those programs and put the targets for it. Very often we see that the low level, the operational level civil servants lack the competence needed for that, and so some enlightenment and education is needed in the legal and educational aspects. It's very essential to work out a system of such education in the sphere of decision making in business processes. Standard systems are different in different countries. We declared many nice things, but in real practice we see that even laboratory test standards should be unified because they are different. An example from everyday life. We have a good fruit, meat production. In the Soviet time, that was a system that provided food to Orenburg and Moscow. Now it doesn't work because the technology supervision, regulation, and sanitary control standards are different and not unified. Taking into consideration all those difficulties, we need to remember about them, and our educational institutions might be the centers from where we may launch this merging process between these countries. We may expose the problems, make them systemic, and using the systems of our educational institutions, make the public aware about the problems and move towards integration. Our academies play a major role in regional development. They should play such a role. Traditionally, all decisions are taken in the centers, but those who need support, infrastructural and educational support. They are left beyond this process. They are in the regions, and so regional development is most essential in the integration of our educational and research programs. And another major point is that this process of coming together and cooperation in scientific, expert and analytical work is really urgent. Scientific development levels in our countries are different. It all depends on the economic, political and other conditions, on the infrastructures in those countries, but each of the countries and the integration processes plays its own role, and the system is preserved. It's very essential that some ground for exchange of expert opinions and information should be set up to work out indicators for building new educational programs. It was mentioned today that there's need in creating master programs on Eurasian integration. This is really a new product. There are some industrial assistance programs, and before country projects are launched with investment proposals, I think our educational institutions and analytical centers might give some grounded opinion on the viability or non-viability of those proposals, could make the assessment of risks. And I think that all those endpoints, all those possibilities of innovative decisions should be discussed at such discussion grounds. In conclusion, I would like to say that this is a wonderful opportunity today to exchange contacts and our vision of the problems. The first integration processes have been already launched, and the Russian Academy of Public Economy and Civil Service plays a major role, a leading role in this process. I think that the positive proposals and the brainstorming should come here first, and on the basis of all that, new steps of developing national programs should be worked out, and as well as the national concept of training specialists in all the countries. Thank you, and thank you for the possibility to speak here. Thank you, Almas, for your very detailed intervention. Well, you were very modest, saying that you have practically nothing to add after Andrei Markovich, but you did add a lot. Andrei Markovich, possibly at the next forum, we may widen the forum of the format of our round table, and that might be later discussed as a proposal. Now, I would like to give the floor to our colleague and friend, Rector of the Civil Governance Academy of Mongolia, Mr. Patartahtoch. Good afternoon, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I did not speak Russian for quite a period of time, and possibly my language might sound a little bit outdated for you. The language of the 80s. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to participate in the Gaidar Forum, thanks to Andrei Markovich, who played a great role in that. For the first time in the past 18 years, I came to Moscow, and practically for 20 years we didn't have relations with the academy. This is the former ON and other Moscow universities, which were previously great educational centers for Mongolia. All our top leaders in their time graduated from those academies in Moscow or other major cities. The link was broken for some time, and now we are trying to revive this tradition of the past. So I'm happy I came here today. For me, the CIS countries are the former socialist countries, and I don't care what name to use. Eurasian countries. It's no secret that Mongolia, in the times of socialism, was called the 16th Republic. But it wasn't a humiliation for us. We viewed such a reference quite positively. So I'm glad that I am here today. We have many problems common with the CIS countries, and now yet I might mention one difference. For the CIS countries, the state structures look more or less similar. In our case, the history developed differently, and the structure is somewhat different. But I will not take much of your time in my overview of this situation of Mongolia. We have parliament, and the supreme authority is the authority of the parliament. President is the symbol of the country, presenting awards and assigning ambassadors. There's the executive branch that is also assigned by parliament. And that means that the civil service and education, training, and the retraining of civil servants have their own specificity. Surely, we had our own good experience. We have passed through a very tedious road up to the 90s. Life was easier. If something was missing, a call could be made by the head of Mongolia to Brezhnev and say, well, we have a problem, and we call our brother, asking the brother to help, the big brother. After the 90s, we felt we were on our own. The Soviet Union, as our major investor, was no longer there, and we started a very tedious road of our own. The civil service in Mongolia is now in the process of being formed. There are numerous problems. As for the academy, we mainly deal with retraining, educating and retraining civil servants. We admit people with higher education, bachelor's degrees, and they undergo education for civil governance or management topics. This is our major line of activity, and then we also deal with retraining civil servants employed in civil service, and on market conditions, we also provide educational possibilities for private students or paid students. The situation is becoming better and better gradually. 10 or 15 years ago, sending people to Russia for education was difficult. Now the situation has improved, and I think that we'll be able to closer cooperate with you, with the institutions that we had very close links with in the past, and we hope we'll be able to revive those links. The main difficulty now is that the stability of civil service and the status of civil servants is not really reliable or adequate. According to some assessments, Mongolia is considered to be a most democratic country amidst the former socialist countries. Well, democracy is good, and yet there's the other side of the moon. Every 4 years, we have to undergo the process of changing the government according to democratic principles. And the problem is that after all new elections, many executives are dismissed from their civil service positions. Sometimes it's quite unfair. We all need money, surely. We work to earn some means of subsistence, and we work with some civil servants who provide budget allocations to us, and then those people are dismissed and we don't get any money for the academy. From 1990 to today, which is 24 years or 25 years, 15 governments have changed one another, which means a government for a year and a half. Sometimes governments lasted for a couple of months. There were other cases when they stayed for 4 terms, but these were rare occasions. Some facts. You have experience of educational activities, and you'll draw your conclusions on the basis of those facts yourselves. About 2000 amendments were introduced in the Constitution. They were minor amendments. For example, members of parliament could be ministers. Now all the ministers are members of parliament. And this also entails certain instability. If some members of parliament want to make the government resign, they can do it. 19 MPs may sign this document, and then the question is to be discussed in Parliament. Present-day government was formed a year ago, and after that, as far as I know, there were 2 or 3 attempts made to resign this government. I shared my personal difficulties with you, but for us scientists, these are real facts of our life that we have to take into account. So, as you see, these are quite peculiar facts. I do not worry too much, but I think that those facts need to be taken into consideration. We all understand and agree that we need to cooperate. Andrei Markovich possibly thinks that this approach will widen since next year, not involving other countries too. So this is what I wanted to give you as an overview of our history and problems. Thank you very much. Thank you for your very sincere intervention. We recalled the times past, more than 20 years passed since then. These were nice times, but as for the problems we have are rather similar. Problems related with the change of the governments or regional administrations, and the following change of personalities on some ministerial or public service or civil service positions. The allocations found with great difficulties from the budget spent for the education of those civil service practically is wasted, because if that civil servant is leaving his post, no one needs to be trained in education. Our colleagues in Kazakhstan coped with this problem rather efficiently, and they introduced a new model in which joining the club of civil servants will be made at the lower level only, and then the system of incentives will start working to support this elite of professional civil servants. For us, it might seem that this is a long and a difficult road, but you've been working at that for quite a period of time. On the other hand, this might be a dangerous road, because new blood at different levels of the governance system might also be a positive thing. Well, when we say that we have different approaches or governance models in our countries, and different systems of civil service and educating civil servants, that means that some road towards forming a unified educational space or some standardized programs will be quite welcome. You mentioned that our academy has become the center for this joint effort, and we view it as our responsibility trying to take into account all the differences and specificities that all the CIS or Eurasian Union countries may have. And the set of key blocks that Andrei Markovich spoke about, the curricular modules that could be used for this start, that is a wise proposal, and I suppose the knowledge and skills and competence provided by that will be needed by all countries, irrespective of the specificities. Dear colleagues, we've listened to some presentations, very interesting ones, and now I'm not sure whether we should continue with the presentations and then have a general discussion, or possibly should give some time for questions to the speakers who took the floor by now. Let's continue. Good. Now I give the floor to the next speakers. We have a list of them. I want to give the floor to Igor Bartses. You may take the floor. Thank you. Our life is theater, and for the second day we see a very nice performance, and the discussions are sometimes even poetic, and I want to make my own intervention too. For those who want to do everything at once and to cope with more and more problems, my advice is, if you want to cover the whole world, buy a globe and look at it. We in our work should pinpoint the key problems and directions of work and develop them. In that context, tomorrow I will moderate another panel discussion. We'll speak about Russian-French cooperation. We have good friendly ties with French universities, and we'll speak about very interesting problems, and I may position our academy as the resource center of the Ministry of Education and Science in this cooperation with French universities. 2 minutes ago, we said goodbye to our Spanish colleagues, and we had a chance to talk about cooperation with them. We are glad to make acquaintance of the Kazakh Academy, etc. Well, I remember about the topic of our discussion now, but I want to conclude that in the past 18 years, the ones that you didn't visit Russia, we established good educational contacts with European universities. We are discussing now the networking between the Russian and French university, or setting up a joint web university between our countries. We really appreciate our friends from France and Spain who have joint programs with 2 diplomas, different certificates in all the languages of the world, and at the same time we say that we might start just coordinating our programs with Kazakhstan or some other countries, and let's not hurry or make too big steps, etc. Let's be cautious in that. I think that all those present here have good ties with the Western colleagues. That's good. But we lost contacts in between ourselves. We do speak the same language. We do understand each other, sometimes even without words. Yesterday, my Spanish colleague counterpart said that Spanish is easy. What you read, you say. In Russian, you see something written, but you pronounce something different, and you mean something else at the same time. we discussing our problems understand what we discuss, but the contacts that we have are human contacts, not educational. On the other hand, I have a group of students from Kazakhstan. In my reporting, I refer to them as foreign students, but for myself, they are not really foreigners. They are my students, and I don't care about the type of their passport. I'm glad that we see here many Kazakh colleagues, and I think that this is the consequence of our old history. And really, I want to remind you that President Nazarbayev was at our academy defending his thesis. Those contacts are great, but that is their own choice.
But when we talk about our programs, I think we're given all the respect for each other. I don't believe that we can really quote many programs that can be fairly referred to as joint programs, the ones that were approved by all our relevant ministries of education and sciences. You know, it wasn't easy to push this program to get them all married with each other. I mean, to push them through the Ministry of Education of Russia and France. And of course, it took a lot of language efforts as well, translation efforts. But now, when we talk the same language, why we need to be afraid of the local bureaucracies now? I think that we can really have some very joint programs. With all my requests towards the network university to distant learning, but I still believe that the live communication can never be substituted by the distant learning and by networking, because a live professor means live relationship. And whenever we talk about the good future, we should always remember about the examples of the Saakashvili factor, because I'm sure that if Saakashvili went through learning in Almaty, Astana, or Moscow, I believe that there won't be any war between Russia and Georgia in 2008. I'm not a diplomat and can say that very openly. So, I mean, whatever number of snow you have behind the window, if you are trained in Moscow, you will retain some feeling towards Moscow. Since he was a student of the U.S. university, he didn't know what to do and what to expect of the Russian army, and he preferred to chew his own tie. So I believe that we should always remember about this example. Practically speaking, we should look at how we can think about some joint programs with our colleagues from the CIS, from the Asian region, then master's programs. Here we can really implement some modules and blocks. Look, when I look at the West, I see some European and American colleagues, and they always encounter one and the same problem. The problem of European American colleagues is that they don't have any Sovietology school or a Russian space training. In other words, all the problems that we encounter with them, that they stopped studying Russia and the Soviet Union because in the 1990s they were sure that we would crash very soon, and why would they spend efforts researching the country that doesn't have any future and will collapse in the meanwhile. But unfortunately for them, our environment somehow survived. And now we see that the Sovietology school is totally absent from the American and the European landscape. And they have some interest, and they display a lot of interest towards such programs on the on learning the Russia as a country and the entire post-Soviet space as a science. And the Eurasian studies or Russian studies may be offered as a training program, and I'm sure that our European colleagues and American colleagues would be quite interested in co-developing such training courses to be able to study the processes happening in the Eurasian community, in Russia, in the Shanghai community, etc. And we already signed such an agreement with the Spanish university because they feel that they need people who will know what's happening on the ground in the Russian and the post-Soviet environment. And I suggest that our Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and other universities may be involved in developing a program to help them study ourselves, because I believe that it is in our common interest, because we should look. I don't like that quote from the Russian poet Tuchev that Russia cannot be understood or measured, it can be only trusted. I mean, I think this is a totally wrong approach. We should do something to help the other world, the foreign world, understand us. And a concluding statement I would like to say is there is one real project, quite interesting. We want the so-called intergovernmental fund for the cooperation in this area support, and we want to have a summer school in 2016, and we plan a very large-scale education program in 2017, and we need support from our colleagues from Kazakhstan, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, whoever is ready. We need to establish a team that would be trained, maybe some in a classroom, some go through a distance learning courses from Moscow, then visit some all those new independent states. And we want this team, including experts from all other republics other than Russia, and we want to identify the trainees for this program, because we don't want young kids there. We want these people to be the next generation of what is usually called as elite. Look, but I don't like this word elite, because sometimes people believe if they live in a doghouse, they are pedigree by itself. No, what I'm saying is that we, as a director of this institute under the academy, I want to see the people who will become the next generation of public servants, executive public servants in those countries. And if we really want to embrace the globe, let's do that together. It would be interesting. I'm sure that both us and European colleagues and our students, future students, will be very much interested in what we are doing in that case. Thank you, Igor. I understand that we can actually buy a globe of a bigger size if we join our efforts. Okay. Okay. We are still on this philosophical wave of thinking. While we speak the same language, I mean the Russian language, we sometimes experience more problems in running our papers through our relevant ministries than when we do that jointly with our Spanish or French counterparts. Maybe bad translators help us quite a lot over there, because when they know that something has no chance to sustain agreement, they probably drop something from those documents. I don't know, but you see, somehow speaking the same language doesn't help us in this case. Well, but I hope that we will be able to create some, design some joint programs before we start speaking different languages. Yuri Kosov, Deputy Director of the Northwestern Institute of Public Management under the President of the Russian Federation, would contribute to our discussion. Thank you very much. I do have some thoughts to share with you. We do have some things to say about our collaboration with the Eurasian Economic Community and with the CIS. Certainly Eurasia is a core for the CIS, further CIS development. And although the CIS still has some capacity to develop, but we should tackle it through the Eurasian integration, through the countries who really want to be part of the same union. Now we do have some expert community that wants to focus on the Eurasian community, on the CIS. When the Eurasian Economic Community was set up in 2000, one of my masters wanted to take it as a topic in 2001 as a Eurasian Economic Community, although it was really hard to write a dissertation paper since he was able to use only some officially published documents, and it was hard to obtain those. But today we see a lot of research done on this area, and we do have some group of experts who devote their time and effort to the studies of the Eurasian community, and our academy with its regional institutes does play a role there. However, if you look at the experts, you will see that they came from other areas of research to start studying the Eurasian community. And when we talk about the master's training program, this is the time when we need to train experts in very specific topics on Eurasian processes or CIS processes to be able to, those who can study the economic aspects of this community, and we want them to have the background education that would help them do that. I was an intern of the Euro College in 1996, and I saw how the master's program on the European integration works. And back in 1990s, they already gave the degrees in Eurasian integration. There were only 15 countries in the European Union at that point, and the groups of 15 to 20 people, usually of 15 people, where every country was present, and all future bureaucrats and future leaders of the European states started the integration in the process of training. That's when they networked with each other, when they went through those master's training program. I believe that this experience may be quite beneficial for us, and when we look at what they were doing on the European integration masters, maybe we can establish some sort of a Eurasian integration programs. And I believe that we are going to start such a program. We have a department for international processes in the Eurasian region, and we want to use that department as the foundation for the new program. St. Petersburg has some specific features. We are not the capital, but we perform some capital functions. Petersburg is the place that hosts the Interparliamentary CIS Assembly, and that's why St. Petersburg sometimes is a parliamentary CIS capital. And we have some experts who do some analytical work in this area, and our academy and institute is quite proactive in the development of that. And Valentina Matvienko is in charge of this work. She is doing a lot of work and supervising a lot of work on the development of the model laws and regulations, and we are at a very various stages of development of such model laws, and some of them are at the early stage of development, some of are very close to the final stage. We are now working on the 10 model laws. They deal with various aspects of public life, and we believe it can work as a very good incentive for our impetus for our further work. We also publish a journal on CIS, and we started a new journal under the title Dialogue that would be all about the parliamentary diplomacy within the CIS. We had a special session today about the role of parliamentarism in the economy, and I think parliamentary diplomacy can also play quite an important role, and our academy has the ability to contribute to its further development, and we see that this topic enjoys sufficient popularity. There are many issues of a theoretical and practical value. There is another novel development there, that is the regional cooperation or trans-regional cooperation within the CIS and Eurasian community. But St. Petersburg, for example, as our governor says, we have some kind of a diagonal agreements with the Kyrgyz Republic, with Tajikistan, with some regions in Kazakhstan, and that cooperation is of a very specific nature to meet the mutual economic interests and business interests. We had a special conference, Eurasian Challenge, last fall, and the conference enjoyed quite a lot of popularity. Trans-regional cooperation is a very promising area to study and to train the new experts in. Another topic that might be of interest. We were talking about the training processes, about how we can teach our students, but there are some other extracurricular activities, and our extracurricular activities of the students demonstrate a lot of interest to Eurasian integration. For example, our institute established a Eurasian Youth Association on the initiative of our young students, and by the way, they're quite great drivers of its growth. They have annual Eurasian Innovation Congress, and the government of Leningradskaya region oblast supports this conference, and the young people were able to actually attract many companies to sponsor that conference. Coffee House, Sportsmaster, and some other retailers were very actively involved. They were able to bring students from the CIS and Eurasian countries who are students of St. Petersburg and some other cities in our area. We also had some students from other countries other than the CIS, and we were able even to start cooperation with some Chinese universities, and one of the Chinese universities was part of our of this new public movement of the immortal regimen. And I don't want to abuse your time, but I am prepared to discuss some ideas on the margins of this conference. So thank you for this opportunity to say something about our experiences. Thank you, Yuri Vasilievich. Colleagues, I guess we need to expedite our proceedings. Well, maybe the remaining speakers would be able to say something in a more condensed manner because we want to save some time for discussion. St. Petersburg certainly is very close to Kazakhstan and to Kyrgyzstan and to Mongolia. I'm talking about the diagonal agreements, so they really bring you to each other closer. But now I want to think about somebody who's the Volga Economic Institute Public Servants Department, Alexander Neverov from Volga Institute. Oh, I see. Okay. I guess he is coming closer to the boundaries of the city. Okay. To become physically closer. Look, but our academy is quite big, and we have several branch offices within the Russian Federation. We have Novosibirsk, Siberian Management Institute, Sergei Sverchkov. Sergei, maybe you will share a few words on the forms of cooperation. First of all, I'm very happy to see our old friends and counterparts. We have lots of agreements on cooperation. We work with the Presidential Academy from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and that's a very real work that we're doing. We use the experts platforms in Novosibirsk, in Siberia, and in Eurasia. We have about monthly platform meetings, and we have experts from Kazakhstan and the Kyrgyz Republic. We also have agreements with the western regions of Mongolia, and we had already 4 groups from Mongolia trained at our academy, but the flow of that students probably is not that high, but our faculty is delivering lectures in Bishkek and Astana, and we even bring some adjunct professors from there to deliver some lectures in our quarters. We are actually neighbors. We across the border from the Eurasian countries. Look, we cooperate with the Presidential Academy. I thought that you will say Presidential Academy of Moscow, but actually you quoted Kazakhstan first. Okay, Sergei, maybe you will enlighten us on the main problems that you have experienced, bureaucratic, the red tape, what actually causes the biggest problems. We all understand that the financial problems probably are the biggest, so everything else is solvable. Look, we are talking about various options. We usually actually hosting, for example, we had an adjunct professor from Kazakhstan, and we paid his costs, I mean, housing and meals, etc. And we should think about various options how to finance all the costs, because well, the budget doesn't provide for such costs, and unfortunately the international performance is not going to be used for the indicators of assessment of various universities of Russia, and that may cause some additional problems. So look, Novosibirsk, I'm talking about it's a higher party school. Yes, we used to be called different names, and during the last years of socialism in 1989, that's when I was trained. look, I would be very happy to host you during this dynamic capitalist development years. Okay. Sergei Garnik, advisor to the rector of the Public Management University. Look, I'll try to, but I was trying to make a presentation, but then after several professors' presentations, I mean, it would be quite irrelevant for my presentation may become quite irrelevant. I can only add something to what has been said, and in terms of complementing the presentations, I'd like to share with you some bullet points of what I believe is quite interesting and relevant for our today's agenda. Well, we understand that today, under the rather tough international environment conditions, we know that on the one hand we see globalization, and at the same time we see that the world becomes less safe because of the terrorism getting ground everywhere. We need to consolidate for the sake of regional and inter-regional security. Will we train personnel who would be able to maintain security in our region? And from that point of view, we should probably not focus too much on the format of our cooperation, whether we cooperate within the CIS or the Eurasian community or whatever other title we may propose, because the challenges and problems that our governments face are identical. All of them require certain harmonization of efforts in terms of counteracting the terrorism threats, and we need to harmonize our work on the personnel training. What do I have in mind, practically speaking? I believe now there is some grant allocated from the fund of the CIS for retraining of public servants, which is great in itself, but I would like to attract your attention to the following, that back in the 1990s, we started the establishment of several basic education entities that were requested to start training personnel by sectors, and some financial resources and human resources were allocated to, but since 1990s, the programs have discontinued. I mean, we need to somehow reactivate them, and I'm afraid that nobody but presidential academies can do this revival successfully, because only we have the capacity to do that, to put it on the business scale, and we need to raise this issue with the executive authorities of the CIS. We want this work on coordination of our fundamental entities who are in charge of this training should be all done within the academies, since we want a regional and inter-regional security take the priority importance. We should take into account all the changes that are happening in our environment. That we need to harmonize everything that refers to customs and tax administration. The Russian Federation established the relevant areas for development of the personnel in those areas. The other CIS countries did not establish such academies or training institutions, because we have special academies that focus on training of the personnel or public executives for customs and tax units, and we have at least some fundamental developments there. If talking about the RANEPA, we have some departments within departments, institutes, and chairs focusing on these topics, and therefore I suggest thinking about this. I mean, continuation from Mr. Bartis's thought. Maybe we should have a special project that would focus on integration of our training efforts.
Especially taking into consideration what we heard at the plenary session yesterday about the reserves such as higher collection of taxes and customs duties due to better customs administration in the Russian Federation. This will present a good basis for developing this line of activity further. Third, for about 20 years, the Russian Federation has been struggling for the accession to the WTO. We achieved that, and for 2 or 3 years we've been full-fledged members of the WTO, and ironically this practically goes on in the times of sanctions and anti-sanctions against the Russian Federation. And there are concerns. I looked at some figures illustrating this essential aspect of public economy, which is agriculture. Countries of the WTO, the Western countries, the European Union countries, in the period from 2001 to 2007, allocated for the support of their agriculture from their public budget about $8 billion. In the next period, from 2008 to 2014, more than $13 billion. Let's think about these figures. On that background, our country, the Russian Federation, planned for the coming period to spend 1.5 billion rubles in comparable figures. In such conditions, it's quite obvious that practically we cannot defend our food safety. And, well, I'm calling a spade, and this is not just a problem of the Russian Federation, but that of our friends and neighbors of the Eurasian territory, our neighbors who are even in a more difficult economic situation. Without a consolidation, without uniting our efforts and mutual support in the sphere of agriculture, we will simply be non-sovereign in our food safety aspect, or will become that in
Это очень серьезная проблема, которую наше руководство осознает.
This is a problem that our government realizes, and import substitution strategy was worked out for that, but it aims at long-term prospect. As for the short-term prospects, we lack the adequate tools to ensure our food security and independence. And we need to pay special attention to the management of rural territories. There is education for civil and municipal servants at each presidential academy in Moscow and other republics, but only in Russia do rural territories account for about 35% of the territory of the Russian Federation, and 27% of the population live there. If we take our nearest neighbors, Asian neighbors, we'll see that the percentage is even higher there, and so it's worthwhile to develop an independent program related with the education of personnel and specialists for harmonic development of such rural territories in the Eurasian space. That is all I wanted to say. I won't go on because of lack of time. Thank you. That is food for thought. And the previous speaker, the speaker from Saratov, could not join us. I decided to find a non-standard way out. I'll ask a person who was born in Saratov. As for the place of work, he might differ from the majority of those present here because he currently is not related to university circles or programs. He is deputy head of the Federal Treasury of the Russian Federation, but at the same time he has huge experience of scientific and pedagogical work. This is really our colleague and counterpart, and he'll speak about Saratov to Stanislav Prokofiev. Dear colleagues, thank you, Dmitri Anatolyevich, for the possibility to take the floor and participate in this round table. In fact, I represent the consumer here, the consumer of the product you produce. For 11 years, I've been a top manager of the third by size civil service in the country, which is the Treasury of Russia, with 40,000 employees, many of whom have graduated from the academy or its branches. So many problems that were touched upon here are really relevant, but I have my own view of them. And really, I'm not a foreigner to those problems, to the problems of the academic community. You spoke about bachelor, master programs, joint programs, and curricula. This should be developed, and much was said about that, but I'll speak about something that was not raised yet, and that is the best practices of training specialists and enhancing their skills and qualifications level. I think that my experience, long experience of work in civil service, allows me to say that work and educational work with the people already working in civil service is quite essential. We may speak about students, graduates who should have adequate basic knowledge, etc. But on the other hand, there are civil servants who need some supplementary training. And for many years, together with the academy, we've been looking for such new forms of education which should be modern, effective, and transfer knowledge that should be relevant, and they should not be very expensive. We have used such new forms for many years. A problem that we are trying to solve in improving such retraining courses is overcoming some discrete character of such education. Formally, a civil servant has to undergo such training every 3 years. We do that. But if we do not build a system of continuous training, enhancing skills, etc., within the system, those training courses once every 3 years will not be too effective. So we built a system of continuous training for our civil service in cooperation with the academy. Twice a year, 18-hour training programs through remote training methods are offered to our civil servants. To make this effective and relevant, we establish interaction with the profile divisions of the academy. We decide what lectures will be presented by the faculty of the academy and what will be presented by our servants. And all the problems that arise are being and that are topical are covered. There's interaction. There are round tables established with the use of modern communication and interaction technologies, and the effect is rather good. The second form that was launched some time ago by Andrei Margulin when he was rector of one of the academies, the public economy academy, which is part of the modern economy, which is part of the modern economy now. That is work through focus groups. We think that this is relevant because we see now the processes when they try to invite our civil servants from the treasury to banks and lure them by higher wages, etc. That is the easy way of headhunting for them. We cannot pay as much as banks, and so we had to counteract those processes. So we use the method of focus groups, especially working with younger staff and holding special events for the young people, trainings, team buildings for them. And we've been doing that till now. And it seems to me that cooperation within the framework of the Eurasian Union or other entities, it's very essential that we should develop a methodology for the transfer of technologies, transfer of innovations in training, retraining, enhancing the skills of our human resources. This is needed and would be quite welcome. Another aspect, this way or another, the creation of the Eurasian Economic Union has changed the functional properties of the member countries and different institutional entities in them, including the treasury. Having knowledge of the national laws, I may say that the documents which are at the supranational level and regulate processes for the Eurasian Union we don't have enough knowledge of those documents and we don't have sources to obtain them. So I ask you, dear chairs of the academies, think about the technologies of raising the educational and awareness levels for the civil servants working at the level of the Eurasian Economic Union. Possibly some special course should be developed for them, letting the treasurers from those 5 countries visit Bishkek, Astana, Yerevan, and get acquainted with the processes at their counterpart level. This would be very useful for the functional efficiency and for the revival of the spirit of cooperation and friendship which traditionally has existed between our countries. Thank you. Thank you, Stanislav Yevgenyich. Really, it's very essential for us when we have a chance to hear the words of a high-skill customer who can formulate a problem, make requests, and participate in the process of finding solutions for the problems with us. Such partnership will be even more effective than some work developed by ourselves only. We need this interaction from the very start and will make less mistakes then. So, dear colleagues, do we agree? And Stanislav Yevgenyich, we put you on the working group list, right? Thank you. Alexander Kochegura from the Institute of Civil Service and Governance. Igor Bartsis took the floor previously. Alexander, would you like to say something too as an overview and include some reaction to what the previous speakers said? Thank you. I do have a presentation and possibly I'll be showing some slides from it. Dear participants, dear guests, at first sight, the topic of my presentation differs from the topics of our discussion here. On the other hand, you surely will agree that studying foreign experience, lets us avoid duplication of effort and use the experience of others. And I want to pinpoint the main trends in the systems of educating and retraining civil servants of 2 countries, Great Britain and Germany. I chose these countries not by chance. These countries present models, the Anglo-Saxon and the European model of civil service, and different approaches are characteristic for those systems, including the educational systems developed for civil servants. In Great Britain, as you might know, wide-scale continuous reforms have been going on since Margaret Thatcher, and the recent wave of reforms was in 2010-2012, and in June 2012 the program of reforming civil service was adopted by the government of Cameron. One of the priorities stated in the reform was improving professional skills and career movement for talented people in civil service. When we study the main documents which were the basis of this long-term 5-year program of reforms in the civil service, we'll see that it includes a number of non-traditional initiatives, including the system of training, retraining, and educating civil service. I want to draw your attention to the fact that in 2012, the National School for Civil Governance was closed. Many of you know that it was previously created on the basis of the Civil Service College. The reform program envisaged organization of a whole system of enhancing the skills and knowledge level of civil servants within a system managed by a private company practically. And another innovation was that the new approaches to professional development of civil service, their careers development, envisaged the use of the main tool, which is e-learning platform. A component of this reform is the professional skills for government plan. You see on the screen different aspects of this capabilities plan for the civil service, and the focus is made on exposing the deficit of key skills and knowledge at all levels of civil service and civil governance, and much attention is paid to raising the skills level at the top management personnel. This program and the plan are not really quite new. They are based on the previous reforms and the results of those reforms, including professional skills for government program, which is a set of professional competencies determining which makes it possible to determine the need for such retraining programs. I apologize, possibly I'm an inadequate moderator, I'm too enthusiastic, and being enthusiastic while I listen to the previous speakers, I forgot about the time, so I have to make a sacrifice now, and possibly the best and the most interesting part of our discussion, which is your intervention, should be compressed. You proposed a detailed presentation, so if you could share it with us, we'll just send it to colleagues by mail. I think that this could be a topic of a special seminar or roundtable which could be launched for that. Well, about 7 or 8 slides are left. I'll just use a couple of minutes for them. Another program, Civil Service Learning, is based on e-learning programs, and here you see some examples of educational courses, just examples of such training courses within this program. Intermediate results. Assessment of the success of the reform was different. One, they analyzed this focus on e-learning. At the report of the committee at Parliament, the use of e-learning for in-service training for senior managers or senior civil servants did not bring good results in all cases. In Germany, the approach is conservative, especially in case of civil service and civil governance. Here you see some specificities of the program of training of civil servants or learning for civil servants. Some amendments have been introduced little by little, and this may finally result in major transformations. And the last slide I show you relates to some trends in improving this system of learning for civil servants on the basis of the best achievements of these two countries. And I think that if we study this experience, we'll be able to realize our own new programs and develop them more effectively. Thank you. Alexander Petrovich, thank you very much. On behalf of our colleagues, I do ask you to leave your presentation with us, and we'll send it to the colleagues, and we would like to invite you for some joint roundtable or session discussing these specific problems, that is the practices of educational programs we have, the common features of those practices between European countries and our countries. A special seminar can be dedicated to that. A question, what is the cost of an hour of such a program, learning program? What is the price paid for it? You said that Cameron cut it. They cut about £90 million a year that previously was allocated to such programs. But I'll prepare more detailed factual information for that seminar, and we'll share it with you. That would be very interesting, because £90 million for China and for Luxembourg will mean different things if we count that per one civil servant. And surely the scale of financing and of cutting those financing is relevant. And we understand that approximately such programs cost about €1,000 an hour, and a small group of 10 or 15 students. Bolatbek Seribayevich, I am a poor moderator. I usurped the moderator rostrum, although we are two here and should do it jointly. So possibly I might ask you to sum up our session now. If the audience has no urgent questions or comments, I will not abuse your time, and will just say a couple of words as a summary. Speaking about joint programs, I'm not categorical. I don't think that the situation is that bad. that we might conclude from the presentation of colleague Bartsis. We are working along such joint programs, not at the master's level, but short-term programs. We've done many interesting things, including very effective 2-week programs for civil servants in Moscow and a 2-week program in Astana. We have mutual understanding here and we're moving in the needed direction. Surely we, together with our colleagues, should set up some working group to start factual work. We have the understanding that we need to work jointly, that we need to do something, but the format of this work, how much it might cost, this all should be assessed, and surely would like to have a master's or bachelor's program that could be used in our regions, in our republics, in our regional institutions in different cities, but this will need financing and budgeting. So I think that that working group might prepare those assessments and we may discuss them.
So, with your permission, I would invite you to participate in the Astana Economic Forum that will take place next year, and we can probably start working on this issue several months before the forum to be able to finalize our decision over there. So that's in brief what I was going to say in conclusion of this discussion. Thank you very much. You know, we really need to do something to decide on this participation. Well, thank you for this invitation. Well, we have some time before May when that forum will take place. So I think that nobody but Andrei Markovich Margolin may cope with this task. At least he is the only one, as far as I know, who was able to do a lot of work within a very short period of time to be able to establish a very close relationship with the counterpart institutions. So while we're still living through the stage when our partnerships are the result of our friendships and personal contacts, but I think we need to come to the stage of joint projects, and certainly the issue of money would remain to be as important, but they are not the decisive issues. Look, unfortunately, we all suffer from the lack of surplus or excessive resources, and we do not differ too much from each other in from the point of view of how much money is spent on training of civil servants, but we don't have too many imbalances there when we compare the countries' cases, and we hope that our countries nevertheless now will start allocating more time and effort and costs to training of the public servants, because that training would determine in the future the quality of public management. Look, Stanislav Yevgenyevich told us, why don't we start right now with the development of a very efficient treasury system for the Eurasian environment? Look, we are arrived at a very good stage of our development, so the enough capacity has been built to be able to make such a claim. And we know that if we don't do something on a regular basis, we will never have good examples. So it's good that we have good customers for our services. Stanislav, thank you again for your very impressive presentation, and the only thing I can tell in conclusion is to appreciate all your attention and efforts in participating in this session. Want to thank all the speakers for their presentations. And when everything goes well, then certainly we do not even notice some efforts. So we rather value some heroic deeds, which are usually the result of somebody's mistakes. Well, I think Andrei Markovich deserves a separate applaud, individual applaud. I think we have one here, Mr. Bater Hertog. Bater is actually a hero in the language, so we want to applaud his efforts as well. Thank you very much.